Strategic Affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and you're watching our weekly flagship show, The Talking Point. A warm welcome to all our viewers who are watching us live, and a warm welcome to all those viewers who will pick up this stream later on our YouTube channel. We're also welcoming again Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa. She's been India's ex-envoy to Japan. She's also the chairperson of the India-Japan Friendship Forum. Ambassador, good to see you again. This time online. Last time we managed to come over to you.
That's right. Wonderful to be here with you again, Amitabh. Absolutely.
And wonderful to again see from Tokyo, Professor Tomohiko Taniguchi. He's been the former special advisor to ex-Prime Minister Shinzō Abe. Abe Shinzo's cabinet, and is a professor at Keio University. Professor, great to see you again.
Great to see you again. And it's very much a timely opportunity, and very much glad to be joining my dear Ambassador Wadhwa.
A pleasure is ours. Before I get to both of you, I just want to play out some of the Prime Minister designate Kishida's tweets. Now, of course, social media is no, gauge of popularity, but just looking at say some of the others in the race and Abe Shinzo himself, I think currently the Prime Minister in waiting or designate, I don't know how to officially call him till he's elected in the Diet, I had about 180,000 followers on Twitter, but soon after he won the LDP elections, that jumped up to about double, I think, over 3 lakhs. But the interesting tweets, his last 2 tweets, apart from the one about the weather, has been about what's called okonomiyaki. Is that correct, Ambassador Wadhwa? And Professor, is my pronunciation correct? It's a pancake of sorts, a specialty from his constituency in Hiroshima, which his wife had made after he won the LDP elections, and that went almost viral. If we just wait for the number of views that's got, it's I think over 360,000 or some such. But in comparison to his tweet soon after he won the LDP elections, it's like 4 or 6 times that. But that's on a lighter note. Getting to the crux of the matter here, Ambassador Wadhwa, in terms of Fumio Kishida, I just pulled out what he said when he was here in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, January, when he had just become foreign minister, and he spoke at the ICWA, the National Council for World Affairs in India. And this is what he had to say about Japan and India and how he viewed the relationship in 2015 when he was foreign minister.
As the first country to visit following my reappointment, because of my belief that the partnership between Japan and India is a special one.
Minister Kishida looked back to the path Japan and India have taken over the last 70 years since the end of World War II, and he proposed strengthening the 3 bridges that link the Indo-Pacific region. Minister Kishida held the Japan-India Foreign Ministers' strategic dialogue with Foreign Minister Swaraj and discussed bilateral relations and cooperation in the international arena. He also paid a courtesy call on Prime Minister Modi. During his stay in France, Minister Kishida laid a wreath at the site of the terrorist attack and expressed solidarity with France.
Visits when he went off to Paris and I think Brussels. But Ambassador Wadhwa, do you see, considering times have changed from 2015 to 2021, continuity in, say, Japan-India policy with him at the helm?
I think without a doubt. Because, when he talks about adding this special to our global and strategic partnership that was done while he was foreign minister. And, he was really there. He was navigating or executing the policy of Prime Minister Abe as foreign minister. So I think as far as we are concerned, the importance to India given during that period as he was, for the 5 years that he was foreign minister, in the relationship, the uptick in the relationship. So I think all these are indicators not only of the importance that he gave to India at that point of time, but what we see ahead. So I think this has been a very happy choice for us.
Professor, in terms of the most crucial partnership that Japan has with the US alliance, not just a partnership, when Abe Shinzo was prime minister, there was a record number of years, almost eight, I think. There was a lot of stability and there's alignment, strategic alignment. How do you view the next prime minister when he takes over in the current context? I mean, is it going to be what some analysts have written as Abe 3.0 or Chapter 3, or is it going to be Kishida 1.0?
Listening to Ambassador Wadhwa, I thought I could Ambassador Wadhwa. Kishida was an eyewitness of the evolution of Abe's diplomacy. His focus on some of the key countries, ranging from the United States, Australia, India, and Europe. So he is of a strategic mind that is very much similar to that held by Prime Minister Abe. Indeed, when Prime Minister Abe developed very good ties with Barack Obama, then President of the United States, it was none other than Kishida who actually played very much an instrumental role in building a robust relationship with then U.S. presidential envoy Caroline Kennedy. She was stationed in Tokyo, and Ambassador Kennedy and then Foreign Minister Kishida met a great number of times. And so the role that he played was low-key, not flamboyant, but he was very much an instrumental figure.
Ambassador, like we're saying, context has changed, times have changed, countries have changed. AUKUS and Quad, how do you see that in terms of Japanese foreign policy? Are they complementing each other? Are they handling different aspects? Do they give India a little bit of leeway in not, getting caught in criticism of military strategic kind of partnership with the AUKUS takes over? How do you really see that?
Well, I think they're two separate groupings. One is very clearly a security alliance. They're not two ways about it. And I think as far as the Quad is concerned, while I must say that there is a sort of subtext of security will always be there, but it is that and much more. It is development. Just look at the last joint statement of the last summit, the various areas and the detailing that they have done. So we're looking at a very, very close cooperation, between the Quad countries. And I think what we're going to see, in a way, they would probably, without defining or deliberately so, reinforce each other. And one must also, when we talk about the Quad, do remember that there is the Malabar, the naval exercises, which now have become a de facto Quad exercise, where these very four countries, work together in the area of security. So I think both have their own space and their own place. And certainly India has welcomed, as you know, that we have also welcomed the AUKUS.
I take on that point, and in fact, also there's a difference between Japan and the US and say India and the US. We've just had a first bilateral between Modi and Biden as well. The Senkakus, the US has often, even in the last few months, talked about again. How do you see all of that, if you could put that in perspective?
Right. The Chinese are provoking Japanese territorial integrity every day, without exception, by sending official boats to let them enter Japanese contiguous waters and sometimes territorial waters. It is, however, strictly up to Japan's responsibility to provide security over to its own territory. It's important that Japan is backed by the United States. Uh, Also, Japan under Prime Minister Abe made it possible for Japanese armed forces to provide security to allied partner nations, ranging from the United States, but certainly other nations whose role is very much pertinent to Japan's security. And I would imagine the definition is going to be broad enough to include such countries as Australia or India if you send some of those vessels or military aircraft to the Japanese to the region, including Japan. So that's what's happened. But coming back to Quad, may I say, it is all about future. It is an endorsement, joint endorsement by four nations that when it comes to the future, it is something that democratic countries ought to pursue. So that's a declaratory and signaling institution. And I think for countries' leaders, whoever they may be, down the road, should develop a habit to enrich and strengthen the Quad on an ongoing basis.
Ambassador, as the professor is saying, it has been and it's moved so fast that nobody would have thought of maybe a year back. But again, as the professor pointed out, each country is responsible for their own security and defense. And when push comes to shove, or as it happened in Galvan, it was India. There may have been help from U.S. intelligence, but ultimately you fight your own battles, right? But so how does the Quad and the AUKUS and all this fit with an aggressive, hegemonistic China?
Well, I think what we have seen is among all the Quad partners, and of them two certainly are also part of the Quad, of AUKUS partners are part of the Quad. You've seen a deepening of various, not only our defense relationship, our security cooperation, intelligence sharing. I mean, there is much more. Of course, what what you are talking about, Amitabh, is really that we face China along our land borders. We face a threat from there, and when you look at the Quad or you look at AUKUS, it's very, very sort of more in the maritime realm. But I think we're a country with flanks, and all flanks have to be defended equally, and therefore there's certainly working with these countries. As Professor Taniguchi says, there's also very important signaling that goes as part of all of this, as being part of these plurilateral mechanisms. There's a very important signaling that we are countries who believe in certain things, and we've come together. It's not only values, but what we see the Indo-Pacific to be and the countries in the region. So I do believe that in its own way, there may not be a very direct correlation that you can make between China at Galvan and what we are, and our cooperation, the Quad, but there certainly is a connection.
Right. Just taking two comments and questions. One from Jai Krishna Bachu says, why are Quad countries hesitant to institutionalize their group? There may be a lot of signaling. And Lata Avasti, who says, Master Wadhwa, how could AUKUS and Quad groupings complement each other to facilitate economic partnerships in the Indo-Pacific region? You touched upon that, but ma'am, if you want to just take that before I go back to Professor Taniguchi.
Well, as I said, AUKUS is very clearly a security alliance. But for prosperity of a region, you also do need peace. So I suppose to that extent, it will be important for the prosperity of the general region that you have this alliance, and for them, the alliance for us is the alliance among our friends. But probably, as we heard from Professor Taniguchi, it is the Quad which has more of a very clear economic remit. And as it develops, it's very interesting to study the last joint statement into the areas that we have gone, beyond the COVID vaccine, beyond climate change, beyond critical technologies, we're looking at critical infrastructure. There are so many aspects of the general prosperity of the region that we have gone into.
Professor Taniguchi, if you want to develop that thought, and also there's been so much commentary of late, with AUKUS in France and what's happening, American credibility because of Afghanistan, credibility with its allies and partners. Some commentators in India, in fact, an ex media advisor to the Prime Minister Sandhya Baru has written about divisions in terms of linguistics, or divisions are coming together. So you have the Anglo-Saxon, Anglophone, or Anglo English-speaking countries, with its US, UK, and Australia. Japan, France, India are not quite in that mold. How do you see that, Professor Taniguchi?
Well, it's tempting to classify those countries into one category. Japan here is an outlier, perhaps. Not many people speak English. But when it comes to whether you could still put faith on the United States, the answer probably is the United States is more fluctuating, more volatile, and it's more unpredictable. But the question that people like Shinzō Abe, Suga, current prime minister, and I'm sure the next prime minister Kishida are asking themselves is, what should we, Japan, do to anchor U.S. presence more firmly in the Indo-Pacific region? After all, you're looking at a country where the United States has had the biggest ever concentration of military assets outside the United States. So it is up to the decision to be made by the future leaders of Japan whether or not the United States should and could remain as a trustworthy partner in the Indo-Pacific. By the way, Kishida, during his campaign, mentioned many times that free and open Indo-Pacific is the one that his administration should do its utmost to preserve. And viewers of this program ought to know that the Japanese government, especially under Abe, broadened the concept of Asia-Pacific and chose to call Indo-Pacific instead, simply because our mind should include India as a full-fledged democratic partner.
You've answered one of the questions from Varun Pratap, who says, Professor, what are the possibilities of AUKUS outsmarting Quad in the future, as it appears to be more formidable because of its Anglo-Saxon heritage? We talked about that. But Professor Taniguchi, Sai Prasad says, what should Prime Minister Kishida's foreign policy going forward be? Mistakes to avoid and counter China. When you were talking about the Quad and the AUKUS, the essence I'm trying to get at is that there's actually should be no division when it comes to countering China. I mean, China should not benefit from any kind of division between these countries.
Well, China is a question that we should face up to now and going forward over the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's a task to be shouldered not only by a single country of any kind, but by a joint effort. Because China is the biggest trading partner for all of us, India, Japan, Australia, the United States. And China is a destination of investment from many nations. And then China's growth is still awesome. Over the next 10 years, Chinese economy is going to be double the amount it has now. So it's going to be very much important for us to stick together, India, Australia, Japan, the United States, and other nations, to stick together to continue to send an important signal that when it comes to rules-based international order, we are the ones that should shoulder those international order based on liberty and freedom and rule of law.
Ambassador, this was again talked about when Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga took over from Abe Shinzo, that domestic priorities, the economy, now there's a lot of discussion in Japan about inequality in the distribution of incomes will be a priority. In the run-up, there were some of the contenders who were seen as more hawkish in terms of countering China, talking about missile defenses being upped, etc. How do you see it developing, especially since there are elections around the corner in November?
Well, I think this is what a lot of people are asking, what the immediate priorities will be of Prime Minister designate Fumio Kishida. And I think it's very clear. The first thing is going to be, whether he says it or not, is going to be elections, because they're going to go into general elections. And then, of course, 6 months down or 7 months down the line, by July next year, you're also going to have elections to the upper house. But he'll have to show what he has to bring to the people. He's talked of a lot of things, and as could be expected, I mean, certainly how to handle the COVID pandemic is the number one priority for most countries. I mean, fortunately, a few things have happened. The numbers have fallen now from about the height of 25,000 per day to about 2,000 now. The state of emergency has been raised, so has been lifted. So I think there would be a little more, economic activity and so on. So they're trying to go back. Japan's trying to move back to the area of normalcy, but yet he has talked about things about how can you strengthen laws on things like the movement of people. Japan is a very, very unique country. It has a lot of self-imposed restrictions. I mean, it couldn't, for example, have a full lockdown that we all had. So there's a lot of, what people do voluntarily and access to medical resources and so on. So, that's going to be very important. And he's going to see how is the vaccine rollout going to be. But now it's much better than it was at the beginning. They're almost at about 57, 58%. So, it's doing much better now, but it wasn't so at the beginning. The other thing, of course, he's talked about is the economy, because the pandemic has really exacerbated everybody's problems, but also the disparities which he's talking about. And one very interesting idea that he's brought to the table really is this stimulus of about 30 trillion yen, he says, about $270 billion, which will be actually used to raise incomes, to subsidies for education, for health, to really, he says that one has to do something about the disparities, which I think, is going to be a good thing to say during the campaign, because he is going to go in, he has to not only win an election, but make sure that the LDP keeps the number advantage that it has. They have, I think, again, they have a coalition with the Komeito, and the Komeito, I'm sure, will be much happier to see Prime Minister Kishida, whom they've worked with. But as they go into the campaign, they're going to have something that they're going to sell, to the people. So these are going to be important priorities. I mean, the other things people talk about, energy, climate change, foreign policy, China, all of that. I think in this short run-up to the elections, I think the primacy is going to be given to both to COVID and the economy.
Professor Taniguchi, in terms of domestic politics, how do you see China policy developing? And if I can just push in another question on a different topic from Lata Avasti, who says, Professor, how can India and Japan forge a robust military economic partnership? Example, the Izumo helicopter carrier deal was called off. There were, I think, some airplanes that were also talked about earlier.
First, in terms of the economic challenges, you see that I'm nodding like this, listening to Ambassador Wadhwa's very much succinct and accurate description of where Japan stands and what Kishida has to do in the run-up of two important elections. Now, India, Japan, let's be long-termists together, and let's put faith on each other, because we cannot be communists, but a communist nation might turn democratic. I don't know, in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but it's one directional. We're not going to get into anything like communist or Leninist. So let's work together and anticipate sometime in the future, probably 30, 40 years down the road. In the meantime, India is going to outnumber China in terms of its population and in India is going to be bigger in terms of economy
And much
than
younger.
China. So I think the Japanese are putting faith on the growth of India. That's one reason why governments under Abe, Suga, and I'm sure Kishida are putting so much focus on strengthening India-Japan bilateral relationships.
Ambassador, in the U.S.-Japan relationship, the analogy is usually of a spear and shield. How do you see Japanese domestic policy allowing for Japan to take up the spear part of it a little bit more? There's been talk of intermediate range ballistic missiles to deter China in the Taiwan Straits, Tomahawks. I mean, how does that particular dimension work in or will work in Japanese politics, Ambassador?
So it was interesting. I think, other than one of the candidates during this campaign for the leadership of the LDP, everybody talked about this, the threats to the security environment. Everybody talked of a much more muscular, I think, if one may say, defense preparedness. And in that context, what may be needed? I mean, for example, there was talk. I mean, would there be a need for preemptive missile strikes if required? There are a lot of things. I mean, it's along the it has to be nuanced. You have to be careful because you have to see whether there is an appetite, a national appetite also. Japanese, really, I must say, Japanese people, I think they're quite, of course, they're absolutely very concerned about what has been, about China's actions, which Professor Taniguchi talked about. These daily incursions into the maritime and the airspace of the Senkakus, all kinds of threatening actions. While that is a concern, but I mean, there are also there are some inbuilt hesitations that are there. But I'm sure we are going to see, as as the days go, a far more closer look at the defense budget of Japan. I mean, should it still stay within 1% of the GNP as it is? And what sort of military hardware will they have to develop, and will they have to have look at as an option? Because there's a growing threat, and the threat is not only from China. Please do remember what North Korea has been doing in the last couple of weeks, with their missile tests in the area. So I believe that
Sure.
they really can't really move away from these threats to their security.
Professor Targiji, if you want to develop that thought a little bit more, and you've been talking a lot about how these four countries, more France, UK, like-minded countries, should look at a long-termist approach. We've seen how the Quad has developed so fast. Criticism in terms of it's not institutionalized. There's no charter. There should be headquarters, etc. But that for a separate topic. Do you see it now that even the summit has taken place in person, the Quad? You see a necessity of, say, a 2+2 in the Quad as well, which would be like what, in 8+8, because economics and security go hand in hand when you're looking at the overall picture, right? The big picture.
The idea that you just mentioned, 2+2 by 4.
Hmm.
So 8 ministers of defense and foreign gathering from India, Australia, Japan, the United States. I think that's a brilliant idea. Scheduling is going to be a headache, but
Sure.
sometimes you should do that. Uh, the essence of Quad is that it is about the future. You don't have to institutionalize Quad in a hasty fashion. You just give uh, a habit of mind to developing Quad for multi directions. And one of the things that mentioned by the leaders of those four nations was about the need to cooperate among four nations about cutting edge technologies, including deep space explorations and cyber technology, because the future war is going to be is maybe starting on the ground or in the sea, but it will shift rapidly to the spaces of outer space and cyberspace. And there is ample, I think, possibility and potential for India and Japan to uh, work together to bring knowledge and science together to develop those technologies. And I think that's going to be important. When it comes to Japan's security, I think it is important for Japan to be absolutely transparent about what the country wishes to do and what the country is trying to equip itself with. And I think Japan's been on a right track uh, in terms of developing transparency and interoperability with partner nations. So there is absolutely no room now for anyone to doubt whether Japan is bringing its clock once again back to where it was in the 1930s. There is absolutely no such possibility.
Professor Tomohiko, Taniguchi, I absolutely appreciate your time, especially since it's so late in Tokyo, and maybe when that, what do we call it now, 8 by 8 or 2 + 2 × 4 actually happens, we'll have another conversation and said, all three of us said so. But thank you for your time, Professor.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and very nice meeting you and speaking with you, Ambassador Wadhwa.
Ambassador, as usual, thank you for your experience and your expertise and your time.
Thank you so much, Amitabh, and again for the opportunity to meet Professor Taniguchi, an old friend and always a great pleasure to meet up. Thank you so
Pleasure
much.
has been StratNews Global, who have experts like you. Thank you again. And thank you to all our viewers. Just a reminder, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel as yet, you should do that and spread the word around as well. You can help support our kind of journalism. There's a link in the YouTube descriptor. Follow our social media handles on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to get the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. This is Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.